What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about the highly anticipated film 1917, which I got a chance to see in Nashville, Tennessee yesterday. That's not how they talk down there. Yesterday, I need you guys in the comments. Is this a movie you're looking forward to? It is dropping on December 25th, and I really want to talk about it, so let's get into it. Two young British privates during the First World War are given an impossible mission: to deliver a message deep in enemy territory that will stop 1,600 men and one of the soldiers' brothers from walking straight into a deadly trap. This movie is directed by Sam Mendes, cinematography by Roger Deakins. We'll come back to that. And it stars George MacKay, who I know from 11/22/63. Now, he's popped up in more things after that, but I thought he was fantastic in that series. And Andrew Scott, who has proved himself to be a really good actor. Sam Mendes. I think he's a fantastic director. I love the feel, the atmosphere in all of his films, distinctly different, but you always recognize the fact that it's a Sam Mendes movie. You can say the same thing about Roger Deakins, who tries something very different with this film. I don't have to go into detail. You guys know this thing is supposed to be one long take, a 2-hour war epic shot to look like it was all done following our characters on this journey. Now, there are obviously going to be some cuts in there. They do a nice job of tricking us with certain camera movements, whether they're panning around a wall, and obviously they're cutting there, picking back up with that wall. I notice a few times when the camera, it's not super jumpy, but it jumps and you're like, oh, that's clearly where they cut, but they did a really good job of masking that there's only one time in the film when something happens to one of the characters when it actually cuts to a different moment. But it doesn't even do that because it technically goes to black. So really, one long take, that is 1917. Because I can't get myself out of this review without talking about Thomas Newman and just the incredible atmospheric music. Even when it's subtle throughout the film, you still recognize that it's doing nothing but enhancing the story. And there's one scene in particular in the third act when that music cuts in, man, and you are just on the edge of your seat, completely riveted, locked into our characters. A lot of it has to do with the technical aspects. Of course, the cinematography, like I said, is fantastic. Deakins brings his A-game. Mendes brings his A-game. Newman brings his A-game. Now, I think the big critique with this film is going to be the fact that the story, for some, may not measure up to the technical aspect of the movie, because I think most people will say, well, it's very close to a technical masterpiece, or it's one of the best feeling and sounding and looking movies of the year, but it just doesn't measure up in the other and maybe even more important departments. But what I loved about this movie, what I loved about this story, and what I think is so flawlessly executed about it is that it focuses on the human condition. A character in a moment of crisis, and there are multiple moments of crisis and danger, and it feels like these characters just continue to encounter one thing after another. They have to, it's almost like solving a puzzle to get to the next round, and we'll talk about video game comparisons here in just a second, but they pull a meaningful object out of their pocket, and we don't know what that object is at that point, but they take a look at it very subtly. It's not drawing your attention to it, and they put it back in, they continue on. That is a character trying to ground himself in something real, because what he's going through is one of the most horrifying things any human being could go through, and you'll see it. They play on that trench warfare, they play on everything a lot of people love to see in World War I movies, but it's done in this stylistic way, and I talked about video games earlier, and I don't mean that as a negative towards this film, but when you're walking beside, next to, in front of, maybe following these characters on this journey, there are going to be moments with the movie that, you know, is one solid take all the way through, no cuts, so you don't have the opportunity or even the obligation to cut back to another story, to fill the void of, oh, we have to have action happening all the time because it's a war movie. No, this movie says, all right, we're going to slow it down at points, because they do, especially in the first act. They slow it down. They allow our characters to breathe. This is something that I talked about the other day with Marriage Story. We get time with their characters to just sit in silence almost. And these characters are not sitting, right? They're trying to accomplish this mission, so they're always on the move, but sometimes they're on the move and they have nothing to say to each other. And it's not, well, we couldn't fill the script there. There's a void there and we just didn't know what to say. No, they're so determined. They're so focused on what they're trying to do. They don't need to speak at that moment in time. And there are 15, 20-second spans of that, and I think that's something that is going to throw a lot of people off, but I found it to be so real and impactful and almost emotional because you realize the hardships that they're facing and suffering at that moment. And this mission that they get sent on, it's basically a death mission, right? That's what this is, because there's a very high possibility that they're not going to make it back. But they are trying to save the lives of 1,600 other people so they don't get caught in this inevitable death trap, while they are, our two characters, facing death traps along the way all throughout the mission. And it feels like every time it almost started to be a bit too slow for me. I never felt that, but I almost got there a few times. Something would happen, whether it's the incredible sound design, an explosion, or a gunshot, or falling into water. It sounded spectacular. If somebody in the back of the theater is falling asleep, that's going to wake you up. That is going to get you locked in once again if you're not on board with these characters. And that's the thing about this film. If you're not with the story, you're not going to care as much as, say, I do. I was just so locked in because, one, I love a good war movie, right? 1917 is not just a good war movie. 1917 is one of the best war movies I have seen in the last 20 years because it handles all of these things that we've seen juggled in war films before, but very differently. I got a lot from our leads because I understood the state that they were in emotionally without them having to say much. We do get a few things towards the end. By that point, I think a lot of people are going to say it's too late. That did not bother me. I am okay with taking a peek into their lives at this moment, following them on this journey, and then leaving them at the end of this film, and I sit back and I go, you know what? That was an experience that I don't think I've ever had before. We had a similar thing with Birdman, but that was a very different genre. 1917 is an epic war film, but it's done in a way stylistically that adds just another level to what is already, in my opinion, a fantastically executed movie, and the film left me completely speechless. 1917 is unlike any other movie I have seen in a theater this year. It is one of the most epic movies I've watched over the last 10 years. It has some of the best and most tense direction I've ever seen. All of these nitpicks that I'm talking about, they don't necessarily apply to me. I'm just saying I can see how someone comes in from that perspective, but I gravitated towards the character. I like the fact that we got a peek into their lives, and they're not saying too much, trying to give us answers, allowing us to figure these things out. A lot of people are going to come out and say, well, it sacrifices a great story for something overly stylistic. I disagree with that. I think this movie has both. A lot of it is subtle, and it's not going to hit everyone the same way, but 1917 knocked it out of the park for me. Easily one of the best movies of the year. I freaking loved it. I think it's fantastic. Oh, man, I'm still debating my number in my head. Before I give you that, if you guys enjoyed this video, if you like this review, hit that thumbs up button. It helps out this channel. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. Screw it. 2019, one of the best years for movies of the decade. I freaking loved it. I'm going 100% for 1917. No movie is perfect, but for me, 100% is everything I want to see in a movie that does its job. I think 1917 was that film. Yeah, why not, man? Let's just throw them out there. The last month has been incredible. There's still a few films I have to see before I round out my top 10 list. Rise of Skywalker, Uncut Gems, just two that have the potential of cracking it. But 1917, you look at the score, go check out my Letterboxd page, see where it ranks. You guys are truly the best. Thank you so much for watching this video. I am so happy to be a film fan right now. This year has been freaking incredible. Next up, most likely, will be waves or some trailer reactions, whichever one comes first. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.